our middle. Aid without agenda, the leadership and legacy of Médecins Sans Frontières. Stories. We all have stories. Nature does not tell stories, we do. We find ourselves in them, make ourselves in them, choose ourselves in them. If we're the stories we tell ourselves, we had better choose them well. I'm Dr. Jim Dubinsky, and I'm humbled to be here with you to share the brave stories of Doctors Without Borders, universally known as Médecins Sans Frontières, or MSF. Our staff and volunteers live and work among people whose dignity is violated every day. These individuals choose freely, choose their liberty to make the world a more bearable place. The act of humanitarianism comes down to one thing: individual human beings reaching out to others who find themselves in the most difficult circumstances. One bandage at a time, one suture at a time, and one vaccination at a time. MSF leads the world in humanitarian aid, delivering medical care to those whose survival is threatened on a daily basis. The concept of humanitarianism is not new. It dates back to 1863 when Henry Dunant founded the International Committee of the Red Cross. In 1968, while working with the Red Cross, French doctors Bernard Kouchner and Raymond Borel witnessed the forced relocation and starvation of millions of Biafrans during the Nigerian Civil War. Kouchner felt by keeping silent, he was an accomplice to a massacre of an entire population. Turning their outrage into action, they created MSF in 1971. MSF's legacy of commitment, sacrifice, and passion in natural disasters, epidemics, and war earned them the Nobel Peace Prize in 1999. During my service, I've witnessed what humans were truly capable of: genocide. The genocide of Rwanda was my undoing. In 1994, within a mere 100 days, 1 million Tutsi Rwandans were slaughtered, the most efficient genocide of the 20th century. I struggle now when I confront memories from that time, the ones that are no longer unspeakable, but are still unbearable. I was in a clinic nearby preparing myself for the long day when a little girl told me how her mother hid her in one of the toilets. She saw the Hutu men hitting her mother with the machetes. She watched in horror as she saw her mother's arm fall into her father's blood on the floor. The little girl, the latrines, as I call her, had no voice. And as a doctor, it was my responsibility to speak out against what I witnessed. Témoignage, which is French for speaking out, is one of MSF's core beliefs, and their legacy. Together, doctors and journalists founded MSF. They report the incidents they see truthfully, even though at times there's a risk in our access to the people who are in dire need of medical attention. Our generation is facing daunting challenges, like fighting global malnutrition and poverty. Parts of Africa and Asia have the highest malnutrition rates. Maybe that's why our mothers told us, eat your vegetables. There are starving children in Africa. Sadly, over 8 million people around the world die of malnutrition each year. MSF creates feeding centers, delivering life-saving therapeutic food to the malnourished. In 2013, MSF admitted over 250,000 people to nutrition programs. I will never forget this face of a mother of a starving child. She told me she was glad we arrived to help because it showed the world hadn't forgotten about them. Doctors Without Borders cut its teeth in areas of conflict, going to places where no other organization dared to. They choose to serve in countries known for their resistance to outsiders. While wars rage on in areas like Syria, Iraq, Nigeria, and Ukraine, volunteers lead the front line of medical aid. The international humanitarian law was signed by every nation in the world, yet deliberate attacks on civilians still continue today, with very few being held accountable. MSF hospitals have been raided, doctors have been killed, and patients have been shot in their own beds. After 58 people were killed, MSF was forced to leave South Sudan after 30 years of continuous service. MSF hires photojournalists like my friend Ron Habib to shine light on something someone else is trying to hide. I have been a witness, and these pictures are my testimony. We're not sure if words can always save lives, but we know silence can certainly kill. MSF sets up healthcare units in displaced persons camps around the world, giving care to the 51.2 million people who were driven out of their own land. Armed conflict creates famine and disease. Lack of clean drinking water, poor sanitation, and exclusion from healthcare can quickly turn a refugee camp into the future graveyard of thousands. Epidemics and pandemics threaten every population in the world. With increased international travel, it really is a small world after all. Thousands of people die every day from the most treatable, basic diseases. Happiness, it isn't the only thing contagious at Disneyland. In December of 2014, the visitors were exposed to the highly contagious viral disease, measles. MSF vaccinates over 1 million people in response to measles outbreaks globally. Another disease MSF treats is HIV and AIDS, which has killed more than 25 million people since 1981. In 2013, MSF provided medical care to over 350,000 patients with HIV. Did you know that for 40 cents a day, one can get the proper treatment for HIV and AIDS? Let's get to it. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Not this one, Ebola. Having more than 2 decades of experience treating the disease, MSF has set the gold standard of prevention and safety. They were the first organization to step up to the deadly disease and led to the treatment of more than 8,000 Africans diagnosed with Ebola. In areas where Ebola was raging, drums of chlorinated water were on every corner for hand washing. With the smell like a public swimming pool drifting across the area, who needs Chanel number 5? Yet working so closely with patients at death's door takes its toll. A nurse told me of how she stepped outside her treatment facility to take a quick break from the intense heat, only to find out that within those 10 minutes, her patient had died. She told me how hard it was to know he died alone, without someone holding his hand, reassuring him. I hope that these stories open your minds and hearts by making the unknown known. When working in the field for as long as I have, I realized the world is not ideal. Take the story of a 12-year-old baby with severe liver problems, which would have needed an extensive surgery. Here, he could have lived through it, but instead we spent hours cradling the infant in our arms until he died. This is perhaps not the encouraging story that raises money or supports MSF, but perhaps it should be. If we want to genuinely change something in the world, we have to do what's necessary. Médecins Sans Frontières doesn't just reveal the outrage of human rights abuses, medical exclusion, disease, and famine, but inspires hope for a better world. MSF leads the world in humanitarian aid, saving over 1 billion lives in more than 80 countries. Many who choose to do this work go wherever they are needed. Of the 30,000 staff members, only 3,000 are expatriates. Most of them return home, but some don't. This is even more true of national staff. Some of the work in repairing the world is grim, but much of it isn't. Hope not only meets despair in equal measure, it drowns it. In this photo, a little boy who just had his legs amputated after stepping on a landmine is smiling. When the photojournalist asked him why he smiled, he just said, "God spared me my life today. That's why I smile." MSF's legacy is still being written with the help of doctors who work 18-hour days treating hundreds of patients. Logisticians create medical centers where there were none, and workers dig latrines for clean sanitation and create sources for clean drinking water. As a collective team, they advocate for those whose dignity has been stolen, and the need is still ongoing. And the most important thing any of us can do is actively assume our responsibility for the world we live in. If we do not engage in those responsibilities, no one else will, and we would live and die with the legacy of our failures. Maybe you're asking yourself, what can I do? I'm just one person. Organizations like MSF rely on the help of everyday people. Consider volunteering locally, nationally, or internationally. Maybe jumping in the next plane to some third world country isn't something you have time for, but that's okay. You can choose to financially support an organization like MSF. You may be surprised to find out that a $35 donation can provide 200 meals a day to 200 children. Honestly, educate yourself on what's going on in the world. Choose to reject the notion of here and there. We have the ability to be the change we want to see in the world. As the great African proverb says, if you think you're too small to make a difference, you haven't spent the night with a mosquito.